All right, and we're straight back from the last one. So now we're going to move on to the camera controller. So that's our camera here. That's all good. These settings should fine. We just need to create a new C# script, and we're going to call this cam controller. Nice. And then that should open up. So open that one in Visual Studio, guys, and we're just going to get rid of the functions. They're useless. That's fine. And get rid of that. That's also fine. Cool. A couple of variables we need is public float, say move speed, and then public float smooth time. Cool. And then this should be in a range of 0 to 1. So 0, 1. So it's going to come up in a slider. That's all good. And then we'll say public void fixed update, seeing as that's the update which the player is moving in. Cool. Now go ahead back into Unity, and we're just going to click on the main camera object and drag and drop our script there. You'll see we have a cool little slider here. Set that to 0.5 and then set this to 5. The other thing we actually need is a public transform player transform. And let's head back into Unity and set that real quick as well. So our player transform, of course, is just going to be our player root object. So as soon as that pops up, boom, drag and drop our player root object there. That's all good. And now in here, we're going to set our, do our cool function. So we need to say vector3, vector3 pos equals get component transform dot position, and then get component transform dot position equals pos. And then here we're just going to modify a pos so that it affects the camera. So pos.x equals player transform dot x, player transform dot position dot x. There we go. And we're just going to set that to x, and then do the same to, sorry, y and z. So pos.y, pos.z, pos.y, and pos.z. So now, oh wait, hold up, that's not going to work because we actually don't want to modify our z. We just want to modify x and y. So pos, we're going to say vector2 pos equals that. Cool. That way z is unmodified, I believe, or is z going to default to 0 again? Only one way to find out. Let's hit play and see what happens. If our pos z changes to 0, then it's bad. Okay, it's bad. So vector3 pos.y equals transform.position.y. Let's give that a go. See if that works. And did it work? Yep. So now our camera follows our guy on the x-axis, but not on the y-axis. So why is that happening? Player transform.position.y. Right, that's why. Pos.z. In that case, do we even need this? Here, let me get rid of that and let's give it a go. There we go. Okay. So now you see our camera follows our guy, but it doesn't look very nice, of course, because it's just his position, the camera's position is getting set directly to the player's position. Not very nice. So what we have to do is say mathf.lerp between our float A, which is pos.x, our float B, which is the position we want to get to, and the smooth time, which is float T, is going to be smooth time. Right? I believe so. Let's give that a go and see what happens. So that's fine. It looks a bit smoother. There we go. So now there's a little bit of a delay. If I decrease this to some more, you'll see that there's a lot of delay, except y is obviously not delayed. So we just got to do the same line, math.lerp, to the y-axis. So mathf.lerp pos.y, float b is that, smooth time is our float t, and there you go. So what mathf.lerp does, it slowly lerps from this position to this position by this position, this float. So the higher this is, the faster it moves. Essentially, that's all you have to think about it. And in fact, we don't actually need move speed. I just added it because I'm stupid. All right, so hit play. And we'll have to decrease smooth time a little bit to say 0.5. And you know what? This looks pretty good so far. So yeah, there we go. All good. And we're pretty much done our character. The last thing we need to do for our character is some animations because he looks very stupid just sitting still. So a couple of things I want to do. These two, legs and arms. They're all good and all, but I think they'd be better if they were slightly darker, seeing as they're in the background. So I'm just going to decrease this value. So what I'm doing is in the sprite renderer, this color component, you can change the actual color of a sprite, which is quite handy. You can make it slightly darker, slightly brighter, make it green if you wanted to. Doesn't matter. But the point is, that's what we're going to do, just so it looks like it's in the background. And then you want to set the position back to 0 once you've had that set up. And now this is when we bring up the Unity animation window. This one. I like to dock this down here. And then we're going to see our whole timeline pop up here. Very similar to how everything else, every other animating software works. You want to say, to begin animating player root, says create an animator and an animation clip. So what that means is basically we don't have anything set up for this guy yet. Do you want me to make it for you? Yes, I do. So create, that's in the right folder, player control, and I'm going to call this idle. So this is going to be our idle animation. And that's our idle animation done. So let's create a new one, and we're going to call this walk. And this is the one where we're actually going to modify stuff. You'll see that there's an extra component here. And its controller is called player root because it's already made up these animations for us and an animator controller for us, which is very handy. So that's what that create button does. Anyway, let's make the walk animation. So before you start doing anything, you want to make sure this red button is clicked. Otherwise, it's not going to be recording the keyframes. So the first thing we want to do is move our arm about here. Why is the pivot not set? Right, so, okay, my bad. This button. So what that does is you can choose to select from the center of the object or from the object's pivot. If we move to the object's pivot, now it works fine. So you just want to click that button there. Local and global, they all do stuff as well. But main thing is, yeah, we just want to set that to pivot, and you'll see now that it rotates correctly. Now you want to click that red button again, record, and we'll set this angle on the Z to maybe -50. And then 30 seconds in, he wants to be obviously on the other direction, so 50. And then at 1 minute, you want to set -50 again. I like to work in this interval of minute. That way you know that this is the start, that's the middle, that's the end, and then 45 seconds is obviously like the quadrants, I guess, is the word for it. I don't know. 15 seconds, you know, so it's just easy to work with, and you can always adjust the speed of animations anyway in Unity, which is always very helpful. Anyway, that's our first arm done. We're going to do our second arm, which at the start is going to face -50. No, 50. And then at 30 seconds, it's going to face -50. And then at 1 minute, it's going to be 50. So I hope you guys are following along. It's quite simple to use this animator. You just move this line by holding it up here. And you can see a little preview of it there, and you'll see how many frames. You'll see which objects are here, what their properties are as well. It's a bit confusing, but you don't need to worry about a lot of these details with dealing with simple animations like this. We're just trying to make our guy look a bit more lively. So our legs are going to be animated in pretty much the exact same way. So this leg and this arm are on the same side, they're on the front, which means that this should be facing the opposite direction of the arm at the front, which means that the Z value I think should be 50. Yep. And then at 30 seconds, you want to set this to -50 and then drag that line over again to 1 minute, and you want to set this to 50. Then let's select the next leg from the hierarchy window. Drag this line straight back to the start. You want to set the Z value here to -50. Then move the line over to 30 seconds. Set this one to 50. Move the line over to 1 minute. Set the value to -50. Okay. Now if you press play, you'll see that he walks, which is quite cool. And I think those are fine for the only 2 animations for now. When you're done with animating, make sure you press the red button again. Save your project. And before our player actually, walks in our game, we need to set one more thing up, which is our animator controller. So if you go back to Window, Animation, Animator, we'll bring up this window here. You will select your player root, and then you get some little boxes here. So let's talk about what these are and what they do. Let's make this a bit bigger for you guys to see. So this is irrelevant for us right now, and this is also irrelevant. I'm not sure what exit does. It doesn't seem to ever work for me. But any state, basically this means that, how should I explain this? Basically these boxes, both of these, they're states. So this entry for when the game starts, it goes to the idle state of animation. And then idle can go to walk, and walk can go to idle if we set that up. And I'll show you how to do that in just a sec. But for example, if I say make transition and then click here, it means that any state now, so idle or any other state that we have animation, can go to the walk animation. And then you can just click it and then delete it like you normally would. To set up our animations though, the way we're going to do it is simply say from idle, you want to right click it, make transition, and click on walk. The reason why this is orange and this is gray is because this is the default layer state. So I can say right click this and say let's set as layer default state, and you'll see that go to orange. Let's undo that. Control Z, Control Z. There we go. And the entry, this green entry button or whatnot, always goes to has a orange line to the default layer state. And the default layer state is the one that it starts on. Right? So that's your first animation essentially that plays. That's how you want to think about it. Anyway, these arrows say that the idle animation can go to the walk animation, and obviously you want the walk to go back to the idle, so that way he can walk, be idle, and then walk again if he wants. So that's all these arrows do. It's a bit confusing, but trust me, it will make a bit more sense the more you practice it and the more you mess around with the settings and stuff. There's a couple of things as well. If I click on these animations, you'll see that we get a bunch of parameters here to mess with. The main one being speed. That's the main one you want to think about. Same with idle, we get the speed. If we click on the arrows, we get a little bit more complicated stuff going on. So let's talk about what these are. This one just has all the transitions in this little table here. So it says idle to walk. That's all it is. If I was to create another transition, for example, you'll see that it has a few more arrows here. Now we have 2 idles to walk, and these can have different parameters. So idle can go to walk one way, or it can go to walk a different way. Make sense? So let's delete that and create a normal one again. There we go. This has exit time, means does the animation have to finish before it goes to the next animation? For idle, it does not. And we can say the same for walk. Walk doesn't have to stop, like finish its animation before it goes to the idle, so that's fine. This little graph here determines the smooth time before. So basically, this blue line says he's going to be idle, and then during this stage, he's going to slowly transition to the walk animation. So you'll see he doesn't move, doesn't move, doesn't move, and then slowly starts to move again. Right? These are some conditions. So these conditions we're going to plus, and then here you're going to choose parameters. We don't have any set up yet. We're going to do that now. But those are sort of like the main controls. You can mess with this transition time if you wanted to. So you can make it directly cut there, or you can make it gradually cut there even more slowly. But yeah. Anyway, moving on. We're going to click on the parameters tab here. And we're going to create ourselves a new Boolean, we'll create a new float parameter. And this is going to be called horizontal. Right? So for idle to move to walk, a condition has to be met. So in our conditions tab down here, we're going to click this drop down and click on horizontal. And you see there's another drop down here. It says greater than or less than. So for example, it means the value of horizontal has to be greater than 0. And then he's going to start walking. This is going to be greater than 0.1 for us. But that means that if he's pressing D, he's going to walk. If he's pressing A, horizontal is less than 0. So how can we make that happen? If we add horizontal less than minus 0.1, this is never going to transition, because it means that he's going to be walking when this condition and this condition is met, which means that horizontal has to be 0, which doesn't work. So how do we fix that? Like I said before, there can be two ways to for a transition to occur. So we're going to say make a transition from idle to walk again. You'll see these arrows duplicate. Turn this has exit time off. To determine which one you're editing, you can choose them from here. That's what this table is here for. So you'll see one of them doesn't have any transitions, and the one we set up has a condition, sorry. So this one has a condition saying horizontal greater than 0.1. This one does not have a condition. So horizontal less than 0.1 is going to be the condition for the second one. And then for walk to go back to idle, we have to have it so that horizontal is less than 0.1 and horizontal is greater than minus 0.1, which means horizontal is 0, essentially. So save that, go back to your scene, click on your player root object, and let's turn that preview off. There we go. So that this component is enabled again. If I click preview, you'll see that the guy in the scene changes as well, because it's previewing the animation here. If I turn the preview off, then he previews if I click on this window. Make sense? So you'll see a couple of errors occurring here as well. We don't care about those. Those were just happening as I was showing you guys. But for the character to actually animate now, we need to set it up in code. So I need to go back to our player controller, scroll up, and create another private animator. Is it animator? Yes. And we'll call this anim. You'll see that we're not actually using sprite renderer, because if you hover over this, it says private member can be removed as the value assigned to is never used. So we set this up last episode thinking we were going to use it for the rotating. We ended up just using scale instead, which means we can happily get rid of that. Don't get rid of anim. We're going to set that up now. Get rid of that line as well, actually. Here we go. We're going to say anim equals get component animator. That's it. And then we can't say it in our fixed update, because fixed update is for physics calculations and stuff. It is not frame rate dependent. It means our player will always move the same speed regardless of the tick speed of each computer or device that runs it. The reason that's important is because you don't want your guy running faster on a computer with more frames per second. Where if we put that in the normal update function, that's what would happen, because that runs off frames per second. Anyway, so we have to create the void update function here, because update is going to control our animations, fixed update is going to control our movements. Now to set up this update function, we need to do a couple of things. We have to set the value of this parameter, and this parameter is in this animator controller. So I can easily say anim.set parameter sets float, because that's what our parameter is. And you'll see that it wants an int ID or and a float value. So int ID, it doesn't really say it. It would be 0 because it's the first parameter, but we can also reference this by its name. So if I do Control C for horizontal, I can just put that inside here. And then it says a float value. So we have to give this a value now. So this has to be any integer, any float value, but we don't know what that is yet. It's going to be horizontal, but I can't just type in horizontal here because it is not defined. So to make that defined, we're going to create this as a global variable. So I'm going to Control C this line, get rid of float here, and then scroll up, and just above the start method, I'm going to paste. So you see float horizontal here. Let's give this a private type. There we go. And you'll see that down here, now our update function is not screaming at us in pain because of errors. That, I think, is it for the player, to be honest. Let's have a look and see how he works. So you'll see that at the moment he's walking. And he's still walking. You can see a live preview. So you see he's idling, and then this is occurring, this back and forth, which is not very good. Let's have a look why that's happening. If it's less than 0.1, yes, okay. This should be less than minus 0.1. And let's have a look at the other one. Greater than 0.1, that's fine. This one is less than 0.1 and greater than minus 0.1. Yeah. And now let's give it a go. So you'll see he's staying still. I press the key, he moves. I press the key, he moves again. The big thing to make sure is that your animation is in sync with how fast the player is moving. So for my case, that seems to be all right for now. And you'll see it does this little like two-step every time you switch direction. That is because our horizontal is a float and it is not a get axis raw method. So if we made this, so it's automatically smoothing out, which is good. If I make this raw, you'll see that the movement is a lot more rigid. And because the movement is rigid, so is the transition between the animations. So now if I do it, you'll see that the reason that's happening is because he's going to idle and then the other animation. Which is sort of not what we want. So if I say public float, you'll see what happens with our horizontal value. Scroll down. You'll see it's at 0. I press D, and then for a split second there, it's at 0. You can see it happening there. For a very short amount of time, it's at 0. And because it's at 0, it's at idle. So the way we can fix that is basically just say if this is less than 0 or it is greater than 0. That makes it a lot more sensitive, I guess. So we're going to change this back to get axis again because we want the smoother motion. You can choose get axis raw, get axis, completely up to your preference. But yeah, this should be a little bit better now. So if I go to our player root, there you go. So it's smooth still because I'm using get axis. If I do it get axis raw, I'm just showing you guys both just in case you guys are using one or the other. But if I play this now, still does it, which is interesting. Oh no, okay, so it doesn't do it as much. Okay, that's fine. But yeah. Nice and smooth animation there. And our smooth camera control. Very nice. And I think that's pretty much the player controller done. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys.